Isn't it interesting that Speaker Mike Johnson is asking for billions of dollars in something he says is not a war, just a limited conflict?
We'll find out. I mean, it's going to be a very specific request. I'm sure it's tied to specific things. It's not a random number, so we have to adequately fund defense. It's a dangerous time.
So you support that level?
I support what's needed to ensure that the American people remain safe. So we'll see what that number is. I haven't seen the details. We just heard the number this morning.
If there are ground troops, should they come to Congress first if there are ground troops?
Again, all the details matter. If we're completing the mission and it's a limited scope, then that's not a declaration of war.
I will not vote for a war supplemental. No, I am a no.
Republican presidents have gotten us into debt decade after decade. I mean, look at Ronald Reagan, the rights hero, and his trickle-down economics, which instead just made the rich richer and soared our deficit. Clinton went in there and balanced the budget. Republican, then you had Bush, and then you have Trump, and increasing the deficit. Republicans don't care about not spending. They just care about not spending in a certain way. And when it comes to war, they are all for spending.
And now here we are in a conflict in the Middle East, which is bringing gas prices up again. I know it's frustrating, and I know it's hard for people. What I would say to them is we've lost some service members over there who have put their lives on the line to protect us, to protect the region, protect America's friends in the region. We can all, it used to be during the past wars, especially World War II, Americans got behind our servicemen and women. And we did little things to show our support for them. We collected metal, we recycled stuff, aluminum, so that we could, help in the war effort. I think right now, at least just kind of keeping a stiff upper lip. Maybe you take one less trip to Starbucks, and so that gas goes a little further until this thing is over and these gas prices come back down again.
I mean, you can see, here you go. DOGE went in and fired a whole bunch of employees in really critical issues around the world, but they didn't touch the Pentagon, the one place, the one department that has never passed an audit, where there very truly may be fraud and abuse because you've never passed an audit. I mean, you just saw Hegseth and the millions of dollars he spent on steaks and lobsters because his budget year was ending and he wanted to make sure he got the same budget. That department didn't get touched by DOGE. They are unserious about actually lowering government spending. They just don't want to spend money on people's healthcare, allowing the Obama credits to expire, not caring if people are just deciding not to pay for insurance, and are gambling on whether or not they will get diagnosed with cancer and be able to afford treatment. Well, how do we know this? Because in the midst of them thinking that somehow we couldn't help pay for people's healthcare, they've decided that we can spend at least $1 billion a day in this manufactured war against Iran, where we are instead killing school children and getting no accountability for it.
The argument is that I, a couple years ago, worked alongside my colleagues to pass into law something called the Civilian Protection Center. This is something that's at the Department of Defense, at the Pentagon, something that has personnel who are focused on this effort of ensuring protection of civilians, of reducing the risks that we see unfold here. The problem, though, is Secretary Hegseth decided to gut this office last year, has dramatically reduced down the staff, not implementing the budget that is necessary. Again, this was a bipartisan piece of legislation passed into law that I helped draft. Because of this, I worked at the National Security Council. I've been there for targeting packages for a president to approve. This fault lies directly on President Trump and Secretary Hegseth. They are clearly the ones that gave the orders in terms of how they should go about the risk analysis. And without this type of office, it shows just how much this administration has deprioritized the protection of civilians. And now we find ourselves facing one of the worst losses of life of civilians at the hands of Americans in decades.
Well, in terms of the cost, the Center for Strategic and International Studies estimated that the United States is actually spending more than $1 billion a day. And this is an actual military cost. Never mind the opportunity cost, let's say, as the economists say, the amount that you're going to spend in increased oil, or the fact that people are going to not want to visit here, etc. No, this is an actual military cost that the United States actually spent $16.5 billion in just the first 12 days alone.
This is high. 469 is definitely one of the highest I've seen it, and I've been here for 27 years now, so that's something to say. That's crazy.
Describe what you're going through for me.
Well, I just make sure that I focus to save enough money for the week to get to and from work instead of, or if I can, I'll walk to the store or take the light route if I can, if it's not hot, but it's going to be hot again. So yeah, so those are some choices that I do make.
Now, Senator Adam Schiff called this out and put it into very specific terms for the American people that said even under the lower estimated cost that was initially $1 billion a day, that would be the equivalent of building 10 hospitals a day in America.
So yes, I'm glad the Ayatollah Senior is gone. I won't mourn his loss. But if this doesn't result in any change for the Iranian people, then what have we accomplished on their behalf? And at such a terrible cost to ourselves in the loss of service members. We're spending about $1 billion a day in Iran. And that's money that could be used to improve people's quality of life here. I looked up this morning the average cost of building a hospital in America, depending on the size, about $100 million. So it's the equivalent of dropping 10 hospitals a day on Iran. That's 10 communities that don't have a hospital because we decided that bombing Iran was a better use of our money. I don't think it's a better use of our money.
So instead of us building 10 hospitals a day, we are instead bombing Iran for no good purpose and with no good outcome.
What is your takeaway from her not saying this was an imminent threat? I mean, she was asked this repeatedly. What do you draw from that?
I draw that I draw the same conclusion I've made since day one of this war. This was a war of choice. There was no imminent threat. Now, the Iranian regime was awful. The unfortunate thing, it is still awful. And if anything, we've ended up with a worse and more repressive leader right now. And again, I don't see any of the four goals the president laid out of regime change, getting hold of the enriched uranium, eliminating all of the ballistic missile capability and drone capability.
The money that could actually be spent here on education, on hospitals, on roads, paying people a living wage, instead being sent overseas because Republicans are obsessed with war. Americans and even Trump voters are seeing their prices go up, not only because of what's happening in Iran, but because of the tariffs that Trump refuses to let go of. The Supreme Court, of course, ruled against him, and now he's got new tariffs he wants to design, and small businesses, pro-Trump small businesses, are feeling the heat and are speaking out.
I'm really scratching my head because I voted Republican, and most of us in the fishing industry did, and we're not seeing the positives come out of it, why we voted that way.
Let's take a listen to one more woman who we spoke with. If you could say something to President Trump and he was going to hear you right now, what would it be?
You are a worthless pile of
And you voted for him how many times?
3 times. That was my bad. Apparently, I'm an idiot.
The war against Iran that Johnson wants us to pay for, but doesn't want to actually even admit it's a war, otherwise Congress would have to approve it, was just called out by Joe Kent. Joe Kent was nominated by Trump and held the position of the Director of National Counterterrorism Center, somebody that has intelligence briefing, has intelligence, would know whether or not going to war against Iran was important for our national security.
There's no intelligence that said, hey, on whatever day it was, March 1st, the Iranians are going to launch this big sneak attack. They're going to do some kind of a 9/11 Pearl Harbor, et cetera. They're going to attack one of our bases. There was none of that intelligence. Again, back to what we know about the Iranians, they're very, very deliberate with the escalation ladder. And again, they're only deliberate under President Trump's leadership because they knew and they took President Trump very, very seriously.
Well, he sent a scathing letter of resignation saying that in good conscience, he could no longer support this war, that Israel would basically manipulated Trump into it. Trump is dumb enough to believe anything, and that this happened with Iraq, and now it's happening with Iran. Well, that letter of resignation on X, where he posted it, had 94 million views just one day after he posted it. It had 819,000 likes. To put this into context, even Elon Musk's posts don't even get close to that many views. And on X, the algorithm, it's all about Elon Musk's views. He can only get millions of views in the most inane comments he makes because, of course, the algorithm pushes his views. But for somebody other than Trump, it's almost unheard of, if not actually unheard of, to get that kind of traction on X. And it's because of how deeply unpopular this war against Iran is, not only among Democrats, where it's about 95% unpopular, among independents, it's becoming increasingly unpopular, but even within MAGA and this new America First.
You know, I would say that this is the most troublesome sign that I have seen for the President of the United States and the Republican Party so far. What are we talking about? Well, let's take a look here. Voters on Trump and the cost of living. You go back when he was reelected back in October of 2024, he was beating Kamala Harris by 3 points on the cost of living, right? Look at his net approval rating now. Woo! Down underwater we go. His net approval at a record low, 41 points below water. You can't win when you're at 41 points below water on the cost of living. Kamala Harris couldn't win. The Democratic Party couldn't win. And I'm here to tell you that there's a better chance that I root for the New York Yankees than Donald Trump and the Republican Party winning when he's 41 points below water.
We have Tucker Carlson, we have Candace Owens, we have Marjorie Taylor Greene. Now you have Joe Kent, certainly not a liberal, certainly not a Democrat, coming out against this war. All at the same time as Mike Johnson just wants us to look away and just hand over billions of dollars of hard-earned taxpayer money that should stay here and help build roads, or at least be used for diplomacy or good around the world, instead being used for this nonsensical war that Trump not only bombs people, but tries to bully our allies into. No one is taking the bait because he has distanced and disparaged our allies for years.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.